Hey everybody, it's Marcel here. I want to talk today about female stalkers. Now this may be one of those topics that people might not take seriously. Almost the equivalent to saying that a woman raped a man, which, of course does happen, but when people hear situations like that, they have a tendency to assume that it's either, in the case of stalking, that the woman was just being nice and flirting, or the guy was misunderstanding or even blowing it out of proportion. Anyway, I'm going to go over some experiences that I have personally had with female stalkers. I want to discuss the societal perception of situations like that, and especially how the way men's intentions are perceived when they're pursuing a woman are based upon the woman's interests, not on the actual behaviors of the man, and how it differs from the way a woman's intentions when she's pursuing a man could be seen, despite those actions potentially being exactly the same with only the gender being swapped. So first of all, my experiences. One day I was walking around shopping for groceries, and I came across someone who initially looked familiar to me. I may have seen her in school or something, and in passing I said hello. This was back when I was very most definitely blue pill, so I was more than happy to find excuses to speak to women. And she started talking to me, and, in conversation we hit it off. She was fairly good looking, despite having a bit too much makeup and being a little on the curvy side. By the end of our conversation, we had exchanged phone numbers. The next day, I started getting messages from her. She had initiated it. And within about an hour of us talking, she mentioned how she waited a full day because she never wanted to be perceived as too pushy or forward. Looking back on it, that should have been a sign that she had wanted to talk sooner than that, and that may have been a mild red flag. In less than a week, we went out and had lunch. The conversation seemed comfortable. She was bubbly and fun and had a relatively normal personality. There were some things about her that were a bit quirky. One of them being, for example, she wore male cologne, I forget the brand name, and it had a very pungent, noticeable odor, and she must have dumped it on because it was quite strong. And she mentioned it was the only scent that she would ever wear, that she liked it, and she wasn't going to change it for anyone. I got to where I would notice it rather quickly when I was talking to her. The first few weeks, month of us talking went normal, until she started visiting me at work, which didn't bother me at first, except for when it became a regular thing. I worked at a major hardware store, so I was fairly accessible, and it was more than fine to be speaking to any customer, but she followed me around, and the conversation didn't seem to want to ever end. My boss and colleagues noticed this and started commenting on it, like, "Hey, Marcel, you got a little girlfriend there? She keeps stopping by and asking about you." Meanwhile, we would still occasionally go out on dates because it hadn't become a problem yet. The clinginess progressed to the point where I could be dealing with some customers or handling, basic work, and she would start to follow me through the store. Sometimes I would see her out of the corner of my eye as I was walking down aisles, and she would follow my movement on the opposite end until she got me cornered in the back of the store or something, and then she would close in on me and start another conversation. It started to not matter how busy I was. When I asked her nicely to stop, that it was beginning to affect my job, she would sneak around where I couldn't see her, and not be as open about it. I know this because I could smell her cologne long before I would ever actually see her, because she was creeping around the opposite ends of the aisles, waiting for me. I would come out at the end of my shift several hours later after having smelled her, and she'd be waiting next to my truck to talk to me. Putting two and two together after the fact, the store that I worked at was about a 2-hour drive from her for where she lived. That means she was making a 4-hour round trip in most cases to come and see me. Before long, she began to try and push the relationship faster than it needed to go. Her religious beliefs discouraged any kind of sexual interaction, and yet she wanted to start having sex. When I politely said that we should wait, she got more assertive. Almost took it as a challenge, and started insisting, for example, that she couldn't get pregnant. Even went out of the way to get the paperwork proving it, to drop it off in my vehicle at my mother's house when I was asleep. There were moments when I had to cancel several calls in a row from her, just to where she wouldn't be able to talk to me while I was at work or busy with family or something. Dealing with this woman's insistence on a relationship felt equivalent to, for example, debating with a used car salesman. They're friendly, but everything they say has a motive and they're relentlessly pushy. No offense to all the used car salesmen out there, of course. To make a long story short, things actually got worse to the point where I had to ghost that woman for months before she would finally leave me alone, and it only came about when she met a new guy that she was able to latch onto for the long term. I ran into her several times after she got into that stable relationship, and she put on a lot of weight. She stopped wearing her makeup, though she never did give up on that cologne. Looking back on all of it, I'm not so sure how I should feel. I probably got saved by the poor simp who took her in. First reaction is probably to shrug it off and move on, because that's how guys handle things. I certainly wasn't traumatized by the experience, and it wasn't the first time that had happened to me, though never to that degree. Now, if the genders had been swapped and it was a guy that had been pursuing a woman in the same exact way, right about the time he was following her around at work, he'd have probably been arrested, or at least removed out of the store, something. Granted, that depends more on the woman's perception on the guy and his intentions in the first place, though, doesn't it? For me, it wouldn't have mattered how attracted I was to the woman. It became more of a mechanical problem. It was affecting my job. It was causing me to become uncomfortable. I was seeing too many red flags and what it might be leading to. I didn't want a serious relationship, nor did I want to have one that could lead to someone moving in with me or something. The blue pill men in the world have a difficult game ahead of them. They have to show enough interest and pursue the woman to the degree that she wants, but not cross a line where it affects her in a way that she finds it as a form of stalking. The line between cute and creepy is remarkably thin. The guy has very little defense against what the girl says was happening. I got escorted off of the Walmart premises one day simply because I was looking at magazines near the registers. One of the female cashiers had become uncomfortable by my presence, and they had asked me to leave. I didn't know for sure who it was, though I hadn't been speaking to anyone, so I couldn't imagine what I had done to cause her to feel that way. Perhaps it's just Walmart not wanting too many penises loitering. Must be bad for business. They might be able to relabel the panic button as a penis button, and then when one gets too nearby, they could mash it for good measure. The button or the penis, whichever happens to be closest. Can't be too careful, right? When it comes to stalking, women, however, seem to have the free agency to do whatever they like with very little consequences. Even today, looking back on it, I have to shake the feeling that I should forgive the situation or even have tolerated it with less negative reaction, despite it having caused me over 6 months of discomfort. All in all, I can't think of many situations where a woman has been a stalker and they've called a spade without a white knight coming to her rescue and saving her from the misunderstanding. So tell me about your experiences. Have you ever been walking down a dark alley at night and heard the familiar click of high heels coming ever closer from behind you? Share your thoughts on this down below, or send me an email if you like. I'd love to hear what you have to say. If you want to hear more topics like this, like and subscribe. Until next time, this is Marcel.